Dr. Olivia Grant stepped onto the plane with a quiet confidence, her presence commanding attention without a word. Clad in a tailored navy suit, a sleek carry-on rolling neatly behind her, Olivia exuded professionalism, but beneath the calm exterior was a sharp mind focused on the task ahead. She had been in high-pressure environments before, often in rooms full of people where her achievements were dismissed until she spoke. Yet, today, she hoped for a simple, uneventful flight as she prepared for her keynote speech at a prestigious medical conference the next morning. She approached the first-class cabin, nodding politely to the flight attendant stationed at the entrance. Finding her seat by the window, she placed her bag in the overhead compartment and settled in, pulling out her tablet and a leather notebook, tools she always used to review her notes before a major presentation. The other first-class passengers went about their routines, some checking their phones, others enjoying complimentary drinks, but Olivia remained engrossed in her preparation, the pen moving swiftly across the page. Sophia Blake, one of the flight attendants, entered the first-class section with her usual air of authority. The crisp uniform and perfectly poised demeanor were her trademarks, setting the tone for the cabin. Yet, when her eyes fell on Olivia, something shifted. Sophia didn't say anything at first, but her gaze lingered just a moment too long, her suspicion apparent. She moved on, attending to other passengers, but Olivia, too focused on her notes, didn't notice. A few moments later, as the hum of the boarding announcements filled the air, Sophia returned, her posture more rigid this time. "Excuse me, may I see your boarding pass?" Her voice was polite, but carried an unmistakable edge. Olivia looked up, slightly surprised, but unfazed. "Of course," she replied calmly, handing over her ticket. Sophia scanned it quickly, her expression tightening as she looked back at Olivia. "This is for first class?" she asked, her voice betraying disbelief. "Yes, that's correct," Olivia responded with a small, steady smile. Sophia hesitated before handing the ticket back. "All right," she said, her tone clipped, though it was clear that the matter wasn't settled in her mind. She walked away briskly, her face flushed, but Olivia, still focused on her notes, thought little of it, until she noticed Sophia speaking quietly with another flight attendant near the galley. Their eyes flicked in her direction, their conversation marked by concerned expressions. Olivia felt a flicker of unease stir in her chest. She'd been scrutinized before, often in spaces where she clearly belonged, but she had learned to navigate such situations with quiet patience. But this felt different. Something was off. Minutes later, Sophia returned, her posture even more rigid. "Dr. Grant," she began, her gaze flicking nervously between Olivia's tablet and notebook as if seeking validation. "I need to speak with you privately." Puzzled, Olivia placed her belongings aside and stood, following Sophia to the galley. As they walked, the cabin seemed to grow quieter. The passengers' glances felt heavier now, but Olivia held her composure, her head held high. In the galley, Sophia folded her arms and looked directly at Olivia. "There's been an error with your booking," she said, her words sharp. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move to the main cabin." Olivia's expression didn't change. The words felt like they hung in the air, and she studied Sophia's face carefully, searching for any sign of a mistake. "I don't believe there's been an error," Olivia said, her voice steady. "My ticket was purchased weeks ago and confirmed. Could you check again?" "I've already checked," Sophia replied, her voice growing colder. "This seat doesn't seem appropriate for you." The subtle implication in Sophia's words was clear. Olivia's frustration rose, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she paused and let the silence speak for itself. "I'm not sure what you mean by appropriate," Olivia said, her voice measured, "but I assure you my ticket is valid." Sophia stiffened, glancing toward the cockpit door, as if seeking silent validation from someone. Anyone. "I don't have time to argue about this," she said, her voice taking on a more commanding tone. "Either you move, or I'll have to involve security." The shift from confusion to hostility was palpable. Olivia's patience thinned, but she stayed composed. "If that's your decision," she said quietly, "I'll comply for now." She turned and walked back to her seat to retrieve her belongings, the growing murmurs of the other passengers surrounding her as she made her way down to the cramped economy cabin. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The shift from confusion to hostility was palpable. Olivia's patience thinned, but she stayed composed. "If that's your decision," she said quietly. I'll comply for now. She turned and walked back to her seat to retrieve her belongings, the growing murmurs of the other passengers surrounding her as she made her way down to the cramped economy cabin. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The spacious serenity of first class was replaced by the claustrophobia of economy. Olivia found herself wedged between two other passengers in a middle seat. The injustice of the situation deepened her resolve. She carefully stowed her bag beneath the seat and adjusted her posture, maintaining her composure despite the injustice she had just endured. Around her, passengers whispered, some casting sympathetic glances, while others avoided her gaze altogether. Olivia retrieved her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a familiar name. Without hesitation, she tapped the number and brought the phone to her ear. "Hi, it's Olivia," she said softly, her voice low to avoid drawing attention. "I need a favor. Something happened on this flight and I'd like it addressed immediately. Yes, I'll send the details shortly. No need to escalate yet, just stay on standby." She ended the call with efficiency, her expression calm but purposeful. Back in the first-class section, Sophia moved about the cabin, handing out drinks and checking on passengers with a practiced smile. But her mind was preoccupied with the events surrounding Olivia's removal. To her, it had seemed like a necessary step, something to maintain the integrity of the first-class experience. But something about it felt unsettling. As she moved through the cabin, she caught the eye of Dennis, the senior flight attendant. His expression was one of quiet concern, and before she could speak, he addressed her. "What's going on with the woman you moved?" he asked, his tone direct yet calm. Sophia tried to brush it off. "There was a mix-up with her ticket. I handled it," she said. But Dennis wasn't convinced. "Handled it?" Dennis raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that? First-class passengers don't usually take kindly to being moved, and neither does the airline." Sophia's defenses rose. "It's fine," she said quickly. "I followed protocol." But Dennis wasn't satisfied. His gaze lingered on her, and his concern deepened. "First-class passengers are not just customers," Dennis warned. "They're connections. You mess with the wrong person, and it could cost you more than just your job. It could be your career." Sophia stiffened at his words, but she quickly dismissed the unease that crept into her gut. She was confident she'd done the right thing. Yet, despite her certainty, doubt gnawed at her. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in the cramped economy seat, her mind as focused as ever. She wasn't angry. Anger wasn't her style. But she knew that when faced with injustice, the right response required precision and poise. Every move she made now was calculated, designed not to escalate the situation, but to ensure accountability. In the economy cabin, the flight attendants moved about, offering drinks and snacks. Layla Reed, a newer attendant, approached Olivia cautiously, a small bottle of water in her hand. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice genuinely kind. Olivia looked up, her calm smile returning. "Thank you," she said, accepting the water. "Just a little mix-up, I suppose." Layla hesitated, sensing there was more to the story but choosing not to press. "Well, if you need anything, please let me know," she said, offering a warm smile before moving on. Olivia's mind remained sharp and focused. She wasn't one to act impulsively. She knew timing was everything. For now, she would wait. The pieces were already in motion, and the ripple effects of Sophia's actions would soon begin to unfold. As the plane soared through the sky at 30,000 feet, Olivia sat still in her seat, her thoughts methodical and deliberate. The engines hummed softly in the background, and every so often she glanced out the window, her reflection in the glass reminding her of the dignity she refused to lose. Her phone buzzed in her lap, and she glanced down to read the message. Acknowledged, standing by for further instructions. She tucked the phone back into her bag, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. She wasn't someone who sought confrontation, but when faced with blatant disrespect, she knew how to respond with precision, and every action she had taken was meant to hold those accountable, to ensure that such an incident would never be repeated. Back in the first-class section, Sophia felt the first cracks in her confidence. The usual hum of the cabin had been replaced by a tense energy. Passengers whispered among themselves, and though no one openly confronted her, She could feel their judgment bearing down. Even Dennis, the senior attendant, cast occasional glances her way. Sophia's anxiety grew with each passing minute. The whispers, the subtle glances, the weight of her decision, all of it was starting to press in on her. Sophia's anxiety grew as doubt crept in about her decision to move Olivia. She tried to justify it, but the weight of her actions began to settle in. Dennis's stern words about Olivia's status hit hard, and Sophia realized her mistake. Olivia, calm and patient, sensed the mounting tension. She had already prepared for the right moment to address the incident, knowing it would be a pivotal turning point. As whispers spread among the passengers, including a businessman questioning Olivia's treatment, the pressure on Sophia increased. Dennis reminded her that the captain would want a full report, and the consequences of her actions could be severe. Sophia felt the weight of her error, knowing her career was now at risk. Meanwhile, Olivia remained poised in economy, quietly observing the growing consequences. Her patience was paying off, and she was prepared to hold those responsible accountable. Lila, a sympathetic flight attendant, informed Olivia that the captain would personally apologize after landing, confirming that Olivia's response had already set things in motion. Olivia met Lila's eyes, her calm demeanor betraying no emotion, but her voice was firm, deliberate. "That's a good start," she said evenly. "Thank you for letting me know." Lila nodded, visibly relieved, but Olivia's mind was already moving beyond the apology. The momentary gesture of goodwill was appreciated, but it wasn't enough. This was bigger than a personal apology. It was about making sure that no one else faced the same kind of unjust treatment she had experienced. Her professional reputation, built over years of hard work, was not going to be reduced to someone's assumptions. Back in the first-class cabin, Sophia was nearly at her breaking point. The tension she felt in the air was suffocating. The murmurs from passengers had reached a crescendo, and even her attempts to remain composed were starting to unravel. Every task felt monumental now, and she could no longer ignore the weight of her earlier decision. The passengers' glances, the quiet judgment, and the mounting pressure were all too much to bear. Then the intercom buzzed again. The captain's voice came through, calm, but with an undeniable undercurrent of authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. As we prepare for our descent, I'd like to thank you again for flying with us. I also want to remind everyone that we're here to ensure your comfort and safety. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to let the crew know." To Sophia, those words felt like a thinly veiled reminder of everything that had gone wrong. She glanced at Dennis, who stood in the galley, watching her with an unreadable expression. The pressure inside her chest grew tighter, and the anxiety spiraled further. She could feel the walls closing in on her. This was no longer just about handling a simple situation. It was about facing the consequences of her actions. The thought of the impending fallout, the report she would need to provide, and the possibility of facing disciplinary action was almost too much to bear. Without thinking, she muttered, "I'm going to check on something," to Dennis, avoiding his gaze as she hurried away toward the front of the plane. She needed a moment to breathe, to think, to figure out how to salvage whatever she could of the situation. She reached the aisle, her steps quick and unsteady, desperate to get away from the weight of the eyes on her. But as she passed through the cabin, her eyes briefly met Olivia's again. The moment felt like it lasted an eternity, and once again, Sophia's stomach dropped. Olivia's gaze was calm, unflinching, and filled with an air of quiet resolve. There was no anger, no judgment, only the steady understanding that the situation had already been set in motion. Olivia was in control, and Sophia could feel the weight of that control like a force pulling her deeper into the consequences of her own actions. Sophia quickly looked away, her mind spinning as she rushed to the front of the plane, pounding in her chest as she sat down, her mind racing. The room felt claustrophobic, the walls closing in on her as the reality of her situation settled in. She had acted impulsively, and now she was facing the consequences, an accountability she had tried to avoid. The weight of it was suffocating. The door clicked shut behind her, and one of the officers, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward. "Please stay here. We'll be back shortly," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. As she left, the silence enveloped the room, and Sophia was left alone with her thoughts. Her mind replayed the flight over and over. She had known something was off from the moment she moved Olivia to economy. She had assumed the worst, let her bias guide her actions, and in doing so, had made a serious misstep. Sophia's actions had irreversible consequences. After a review of her treatment of Dr. Olivia Grant, which raised concerns of discrimination, Sophia was informed that her behavior had breached the airline's values of fairness and professionalism. Despite her desire to explain herself, the truth was clear, and she was terminated immediately. Meanwhile, Olivia had already set in motion reforms at the airline, advocating for changes to address bias and discrimination. She felt a quiet vindication as Sophia's termination was confirmed, but her focus remained on systemic change. Sophia, facing the loss of her career, reflected deeply on her mistakes, feeling the weight of regret. Sophia eventually reached out to Olivia, apologizing for her actions. Olivia acknowledged the apology, but remained committed to broader reform. As the airline implemented new training initiatives, both women faced personal challenges. Olivia continued to push for progress, while Sophia, after her dismissal, worked with a nonprofit on diversity initiatives, determined to confront her biases. The journey of transformation for both women was just beginning.